This is Dr. Sushma, your anatomy educator here at Auricle. We are in the series of neuroanatomy. In today's class, we will be studying cerebellum and basal ganglia. Today's class is all about how motor movements are executed, and how the movements are actually coordinated between cerebellum, and how exactly the movement takes place. So today's class is all about motor things. Okay. Yeah. We at Oracle offer you uh, live classes, recorded sessions, notes, and MCQs. In the live classes, you have an educator who comes online, and you can log in and you can ask your doubts online and you can get them clarified live. If you still have any doubts and you haven't understood anything, you always can go back to recorded lessons. These videos are very crisp and they're all based on the recent CBME curriculum, which will help you not only to ace your board examinations, but also to ace your entrance examinations. We also have notes which are full of diagrams and full of concepts, that is based on this recent CBME curriculum. And MCQs will definitely help you in your upcoming next examination. And live classes are very useful to keep you on track, especially during examinations, when you tend to go off track during the study holidays. You have these live classes which will be extremely helpful to you to concentrate on your examinations. Then the best of all is personalized counseling sessions, where you'll be given a buddy, you'll be given a mentor, and they will help you with academics, and otherwise, if you are overwhelmed, if you are stressed out about exams, if you are not able to cope up, they'll give you a proper study plan, they'll hold your hands, they'll sit with you, and they'll make sure that you ace through your examination. And we have three different models of subscription. In the basic plan, you get the pre-recorded class and live classes, and quick revision crash course. And in the standard module, you have pre-recorded class, live classes, and also live doubt clarification sessions, along with the revision express modules. Then in the premium plan, you get everything. You have pre-recorded class, you have live class, you have live doubt clarification sessions as well, one-on-one personalized guidance, notes, and quick revision examination modules. It's like it's all in one kind of a package. And you can use my coupon code Dr. Sushma 20 for additional discounts across all three subscriptions. Okay. And this is the tentative schedule that we have up until today. And from tomorrow, we will be starting with ventricles and dural venous sinuses, and so many other things also from next class onwards. And today's class, we will start, right? Now, in today's class, we are, as I said, discussing cerebellum and basal ganglia. Okay. Now, cerebellum is called as little brain, correct? It's a Latin name for little brain, which is the largest part of the hindbrain, right? We have forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain, and cerebellum is the largest part of the hind brain that occupies most of the posterior cranial fossa. Okay. Now, if you look at this, look at the picture here, and this aspect that I'm pointing out, which is somewhat colored in gray, is the cerebellum, correct? What is the location of cerebellum? It lies behind the pons and medulla. Like, for example, I'm looking at the brain, holding the brain like this and looking at it from anteriorly, cerebellum lies behind pons and medulla. So that is why, if I have to visualize pons and medulla, I'll have to reflect cerebellum by cutting the peduncles, which we've already discussed in the previous classes, correct? Yeah, because it lies behind the pons and medulla, it actually forms the roof of the fourth ventricle. If you remember in the last class, I told you medulla is a conical shape. There is a closed end and there's an open end. In the open end is what forms the floor of the fourth ventricle. If you imagine medulla to be like this, and here is the floor of the fourth ventricle, you have cerebellum sitting on top like this. So if this is the floor, This becomes the roof. So floor of the fourth ventricle is formed by the open part of the medulla, whereas the roof of the fourth ventricle is actually formed by the cerebellum. Cerebellum actually lies on top of pons and medulla. I'll have to cut open the inferior and middle cerebellar peduncles to remove cerebellum, then visualize pons and medulla. Midbrain stays slightly above cerebellum. I do not have to remove the peduncles. Okay. Yeah. Now, it is separated from the posterior part of the cerebrum by the tentorum cerebelli. Okay. Yeah. Now look at this, guys. So this is where the cerebellum is. And I have taken as, sagittal, sorry, coronal section here, and I can see different aspects. I can see midbrain, I can pons, medulla, and I can also see the cerebellum here. Correct? This is the fourth ventricle. And as you can see, the roof of the fourth ventricle is formed. You can just take out the cerebellum like this and place it over the fourth ventricle, and that forms the roof. I have cut it open like this. So that is the mid sagittal section that I am showing here. Okay. Yes. Now, what is the external features of cerebellum? If I have, let's say, imagine that I have taken out this cerebellum, I've separated it from the rest of the CNS, and now I'm holding it in my hands. How does the cerebellum look like? Basically, I have two cerebellar hemispheres, as you can see. There is a median vermis, and there are two surfaces, superior and inferior surface. Two hemispheres, there's a median vermis and two surfaces. There are three fissures, fissure prima, and there is a horizontal fissure, and there is a posterolateral fissure. This is the primary fissure, this is the horizontal fissure, and there is a posterolateral fissure, and there are three lobes in each hemisphere. What are the three lobes that we have? We have anterior lobe, posterior lobe, and flocculonodular lobe. We'll talk about the lobes in detail. Okay. Now look at this, guys. So this is the median vermis. These are actually cerebellum has many fancy names. There is a part called as uvula, and there's a part called as pyramid. Pyramid and uvula are not the structures that you are familiar with. It's just a fancy name given over here. There is a lobulus simplex, folium, and you don't have to remember all of these parts. Correct? It's impossible to remember all of these parts for UG level. It's there for PGs and for higher classes, I suppose. But for you don't have to remember. All you have to know is there's a median vermis, and there are three fissures, and there are three lobes which are important for us. Okay. Yes. Now, this phylogenetic subdivision is the very, very important concept that you have to grasp. Guys, how we developed as human beings is we were monkeys before, isn't it? From monkey to man is how the evolution of human beings took place. Correct? If you look at how thousands of years ago, how man was, he was a monkey first, and then from being a four-legged animal to he became a two-legged animal. He stood up on his feet, and then he started hunting. Then he started building homes. Then he started making groups. Now we are the most advanced version of human species, and now we are doing so many finer aspects. Correct? Our entire organ system, especially the brain, also underwent the same kind of evolution, and the brain that we have today is the most advanced version. Correct? It's just like iPhone version 1 2. Now there is a 13 14, and it just goes on and on. It's similar to that only. We were version 1, now we have version 14, which is the most advanced version. So we were monkeys at one point of time, now we are human beings, right? Similarly, our brain also underwent the similar evolution. Initially, the only job of the man was to just stand and walk. Correct? Once he started evolving from a monkey to becoming a man, the job of the human body or the job of the brain was to make sure that the human being stands up on his feet straight. Correct? Then he started hunting, he started running. Because of that, oh, now I need to balance the body also. The brain learned that, okay, now the human being is now actually, he is supposed to make all of these difficult and finer movements. So I need to evolve as well. So brain also evolved in such a way that during running, during chasing an animal, the man should not fall down. Later, thousands of years later, now the kind of movements that we do, for example, typing or scrolling reels, or even doing all the finer like Zardozi and all of these works, it's much, much, much more advanced and much, much more finer movements that we are doing. So the brain also evolved in the similar fashion. This is extremely visible in a structure like cerebellum because it is all about movement and it is all about balance. This is the phylogenetic subdivision that I'm talking about. Initially, the very first cerebellum that developed was the vestibulocerebellum that was only concerned with balance. It communicates with vestibular nucleus and it's only concerned with balance. Initially, when the man from four-legged animal became a two-legged animal, the whole purpose of human race as such was to make this man stand straight. So that is why we had only vestibulocerebellum. Then came the spinocerebellum, which is concerned with the appendicular balance and appendicular movements. Then the man started running, man started hunting. That is why we had spinocerebellum develop. Now, right now, we are doing much finer movements like typing or tying or sewing and so many other things. Right now we are the most advanced versions of human beings to cope up with this or to balance all of these finer movements. I had the new cerebellum developed, that is the neocerebellum. This phylogenetic evolution took place for thousands and thousands of years. Thousands of years later, I may have a completely different looking cerebellum. I don't know. But as of today, these are the three different lobes of cerebellum. That is, we have the anterior lobe, posterior lobe, and the flocculonodular lobe. The green one that I'm showing over here is the vestibulocerebellum, which is only concerned with maintenance of balance and control of eye movements. Then, as we evolved, we had to be more skilled. We had to hunt, we had to run. For all of those things, then we had the spinocerebellum develop, which is the anterior lobe, which is concerned with the regulation of muscle tone and coordination of skilled voluntary movement. Then we have the neocerebellum, which is also called as cerebrocerebellum, which is concerned with the planning of the voluntary activity. Right? So this is the phylogenetic subdivision of cerebellum, which is very, very important. The vestibulocerebellum is also called archicerebellum. That is the flocculonodular lobe of cerebellum. Spinocerebellum mainly has this uvula and pyramids and also the anterior lobe. And rest everything else, the posterior lobe is entirely made up of neocerebellum, also called as cerebrocerebellum. Understood? This is the the phylogenetic evolution or the phylogenetic subdivision of cerebellum. I hope you've understood now. Next, how is the cerebellum connected with the brainstem? What are the three parts of brainstem? Midbrain, pons, medulla. Midbrain communicates with cerebellum via the superior peduncle. Pons communicate with cerebellum via middle peduncle. Medulla communicates with inferior cerebellar peduncle. As simple as this. Through these three peduncles, cerebellum is attached to the rest of the central nervous system. Superior cerebellar is also called as brachium conjunctivum, brachium pontis, and restiform body. Just fancy names. A lot of fancy names in cerebellum, guys. I suggest that you don't really think about it. You don't really try to memorize it. Just know that superior cerebellar peduncle connects with midbrain, middle, pons, inferior, medulla. As simple as it gets. Now, what is the internal structure? Let's say I'm taking a cut section of cerebellum, how it looks. I have the outer gray matter, inner white matter, right? Outer gray matter, inner white matter. This inner white matter, as you can see, is in the form of a distinctive tree-like pattern called as arbor vitae or tree of life. This white matter, this is the white matter that actually has the deep cerebellar nuclei, the globose nucleus, emboliform nucleus, all of these four pairs of different nuclei that you study in physiology is actually present in the inner white matter. If you take a cut section of cerebellum, I have an outer gray matter, inner white matter. In the white matter, I actually have four pairs of nuclei. Then let's look at the cerebellar cortex, which is the outer gray matter. In the inner white matter, I have four different nuclei. Look at the outside part. Outside part is the outside gray matter. So this is the white matter. This is the outer gray matter. Now let's say I'm taking a cut section somewhere here. The outer gray matter area. In the gray matter, I basically have 3 layers and 5 different types of neurons. I would say 3 layers, 5 different types of cells, right? The first layer is the outermost layer, molecular layer. Middle layer is the Purkinje cell layer. Inner layer is the granular cell layer. In the cerebellum, I have white matter and gray matter. In the white matter, I have 4 pairs of deep cerebellar nuclei. In the gray matter, I have 3 layers, 5 different pairs of cells. Okay. In the outer molecular layer, I have 2 cells, basket cells, stellate cells. Middle layer is the Purkinje cell layer. I have Purkinje cell. Granular layer has granular cell and Golgi cell. Is there anything to memorize here, guys? 3 layers. First layer is the basket and stellate cells, molecular layer. Purkinje cell is in Purkinje layer. G for granule, G for Golgi, present in G for granule cell layer. Who told you that anatomy is difficult? Anatomy is all about finding these patterns, finding these connections, understanding what the concept is. Anatomy is never difficult if you understand. This is the bedrock of entire clinical medicine. Okay, so cerebellum, white matter has all my deep nuclei, gray matter has all of these cells. First molecular, second Purkinje, third granule. Molecular, 2 cells, stellate cells, basket cells, Purkinje cells in the Purkinje cell layer, granule and Golgi cells in the granule cell layer. Okay. Purkinje cell axons are the only output from the cerebellar cortex to the deep nuclei. Understand this statement. Pay attention to this statement, guys. Purkinje cells are the only output from the cortex to the deep cerebellar nuclei, not from the cerebellum itself. Whenever I hear a lot of students make this mistake when they say when they think of Purkinje cell, they think that Purkinje cell is the output from the cerebellum. No, Purkinje cells are the axons of Purkinje cells are not the output from the cerebellum. They are from the cerebellar gray matter. That is, they are the output from the cerebellar cortex, not from the entire cerebellum itself. Okay, never make that mistake. The output actually comes from the deep cerebellar nuclei in the form of cerebellodentate and cerebellodento-rubro tracts, and that goes into the cerebral cortex. But if they ask you what is the output from the cerebellar gray matter or the cerebellar cortex, it is Purkinje cell. Output from the cerebellum itself, the axons, they come from the deep cerebellar nuclei. 2 different statements here. Okay. Now, cerebellum gets its afferent and efferent from so many different pathways and so many different tracts enter and they exit. Before I go into this, let me tell you the function of cerebellum. Okay. Now, basically, suppose if I have to make a movement like this, okay, the output is always from the pyramidal tract. But let me make it even simpler for you, right? Now, in a country like India, who makes all the decision? Prime Minister makes all the decision, correct? Let's say what bridge to build, what cities to build, what trains to buy, what weapons to buy, which country are the friendly countries. All of this is decided by the Prime Minister. How does the Prime Minister decide all this? I mean, everybody cannot know everything, right? I mean, eventually they're also human beings. How the Prime Minister decides is he'll have all these cabinet secretaries around him who are experts in their own areas, and they give him inputs. They tell the prime minister that, okay, so and so country is a friendly country. We can buy weapons from them. So and so country is a friendly country. We can buy certain goods from them. Or this particular train will help boost the Indian economy. So there are different portfolios which are held by these cabinet secretaries that give input to the prime minister. Eventually, prime minister, with his own wisdom, he thinks and he decides, yes, this is the decision I'm going to make, and this is how it helps the country or not help the country, depending upon what the decision is. Right? I have a boss around him. He, has so many, smart people who give him inputs, and finally he makes the decision. Who executes this decision? Let's say the prime minister asks, gives a decision that we need to build a bridge. I have a ministry. I have a particular ministry that takes up this work and they execute it. Similarly, in our head also, in our nervous system also, same thing happens. There is the cerebrum, who is like the prime minister who makes all the decisions. Who gives input to cerebrum? So many areas. Thalamus, it gives inputs vis-a-vis sensory things. I have the cerebellum and basal ganglia who give input to the cerebrum vis-a-vis motor movements. Correct? Now, who gives input to the cerebrum? All of this, so many tracts. Like, suppose if there's a cabinet secretary, even he cannot know anything. He also gets inputs from district collectors and, the hierarchical chain. Similarly, here also, cerebellum get all its inputs and then it tells the cerebrum, it whatever the input is, it gives to the cerebrum. Then the cerebrum decides whether or not I should do this movement. For example, let's say I have to cross the road. To cross the road, I need to, number one, place my leg. Correct? I need to start walking. Now, cerebrum is the boss finally who decides whether or not I should move. Now, the cerebellum is the guy who gets inputs from so many different areas. He'll tell the eye. No, he'll look at the, tell the eye to look at the surroundings and give me the input. Whether is it safe to move now or not, there's no vehicle. Then it tells the spinal cord also. Then it tells the dorsal column pathway to make sure that the proprioception is working properly in my joints. So finally, cerebellum gets all its inputs from so many different pathways. It processes it, then it tells the cerebrum whether the movement is safe or not. Let's say the cerebellum told the cerebrum that yes, now the movement, I have analyzed everything. I've told eye to look everywhere, and eye has, the visual pathway has said ki yes, fine. The surroundings look fine to my eyes. So cerebellum got an input from there. Cerebellum spoke to dorsal column pathway about the vibration, proprioception, and everything. So, excuse me, guys. Yeah. So then the cerebellum got its input from uh, the cerebellum gets its inputs from different pathways and everything. And finally, just a second, guys. There's a snag. Just hold on for a second. I'll stop sharing the PPT. Yeah. Good evening, guys. Sorry for the delay. There was some technical issue. Yeah, as I was saying, cerebellum receives its so many different inputs from different, tracts, and finally it processes all the inputs and gives an output to the cerebrum, says whether this movement is safe or not. So, if you look at all the different pathways that we have, there is dorsal spinocerebellar pathway, right? And there is ventral spinocerebellar. Then there is cuneo-cerebellar, vestibulo-cerebellar, tacto-cerebellar, and corticopontocerebellar and olivo-cerebellar. Now look at it, guys. What is tectocerebellar doing? Auditory and visual impulses, proprioceptive impulses, vestibular impulses. So it gets its input from so many different pathways across, and then finally it processes it and tells the cerebrum whether this particular movement is safe or not, whether this particular movement can be executed or not. Okay, you don't have to remember all of these tracts, but at least you should have an idea about what different tracts are entering the cerebellum. Okay, yes. Then what is the efferent cerebellar pathway? Now it has gotten all the afferent pathways from all of these, it has processed it. Then the entire output of the cerebral cortex is through the Purkinje cells. Now, these axons of the Purkinje cells, then what they do is they end up by the synapsing with the nucleus of the deep cerebellum. Correct? There are deep cerebellar nuclei, globose nucleus, emboliform nuclei, all of them DEGF. If you remember, that is the the mnemonic that we have. Correct? Dentate, emboliform, globus, and sorry, I forgot the F1. Sorry. Yeah, so DEGF is the mnemonic that we have, and then they synapse with the neurons of the deep cerebellar nuclei. From the deep cerebellar nuclei, the efferents arise out of the cerebellum. Okay. Now there are two tracts which are the cerebello-thalamo-cortical, one tract, cerebellum to red nucleus to thalamus to cortex, another tract. Through these two tracts, which arise from the superior cerebellar peduncle, the output, the decision from the cerebellum goes to the cerebrum. Okay. Then the efferent cerebellar pathways are globose emboliform rubral, dentothalamic, fastigial vestibular, and fastigial reticular. So basically, I have these two different pathways, correct? Globose emboliform rubral, dentothalamic, fastigial vestibular, and fastigial reticular. So output from the cerebellum goes through these pathways and eventually it reaches the cerebrum. Okay? Yes. Then, what are the functions of cerebellum? As I said, number one, control of tone and posture. So cerebellum is that guy which tells the cerebrum whether or not the tone and posture is right. Cerebellum as such cannot make any decision, but cerebellum can actually tell the cerebrum whether this particular movement is safe or not, whether this particular movement affects the tone and posture in any ways. Okay, so that is the function of cerebellum, to give this input. The output from the cerebrum comes in the form of pyramidal tract, correct? But the input to the cerebrum comes from the cerebellum. So cerebellum is that little brain. Cerebrum is the boss, but cerebellum is the boss behind the boss. Cerebellum will tell the cerebrum whether to do this movement or not, but then the cerebrum will decide considering so many things. Okay, so number one function is the control of tone and posture. Okay, that is the main function of the cerebellum, right? Then second function is the control of the equilibrium. So this is the main function of vestibulocerebellum. As we know, equilibrium is concerned with vestibulocerebellum because vestibulocerebellum talks with the vestibular nucleus, the eighth cranial nerve nucleus, and then it gets its input from the eighth cranial nucleus, then tells whether this movement is safe or not. Correct? Yes. Then control of voluntary movement is a function of the neocerebellum, that is cerebrocerebellum, that tells whether this particular voluntary movement is safe or not. Correct? Yeah. So basically, it acts as receives its two types of information. Number one, intended plan of movement and what actually the movement result is. So cerebellum plans both. Cerebellum first gets the idea about what the movement is. While the movement is happening, also cerebellum gets its inputs, whether the movement is happening properly or not. Then it tells the cerebrum, ki, yes, this was the intended movement and this is the movement happening. The whatever that is happening is going on right. Then the cerebrum further, either it intensifies the movement or it stops the movement. Okay. Now, learning of new skilled voluntary movements is role of the ION, inferior olivary nuclei, as I said, is the hub of so many motor activities, correct? Now, each Purkinje cell receives its output from a single climbing fibers. If you remember in physiology, they teach you about climbing fiber and mossy fiber. Climbing fibers are those which come from the inferior olivary nuclei. They directly go on synapse with the Purkinje cells. Mossy fibers are those they reach only till the granular layer. From the granular layer, they then go into the Purkinje cell via the granule cells. Correct? The only excitatory cells are the granule cells, isn't it? The mossy fibers, they reach only till the granular layer. Then they excite the granule cells, and these granule cells further they synapse with the Purkinje cells. Okay, so these are two different types of fibers afferents of the cerebellum that you will learn in physiology. Right now, each climbing fiber, they cause a burst of spikes in the Purkinje cell whenever a new skilled movement is done. Now, this complex spike causes long-term modifications in the pattern of the mossy fiber input to the Purkinje cells. That is how a movement gets registered. Right? Now, the climbing fiber input gets increased when any new skilled movement is learned. All right? Yes. Next, whenever there is a cerebellar dysfunction, cerebellum is not working fine. So what happens? Number one, disturbance in the posture, because as I keep repeating, posture is determined by the cerebellum, which is very important. Number two, ataxia. Again, incoordination of movements. When this hub, the movement hub is cerebellum, and that in itself is disturbed, the body goes berserk. It doesn't know whether this movement is fine, that movement is fine. Nobody is giving cerebrum the input about whether this movement is safe or not. So cerebrum cannot decide on its own. Because cerebellum is lost, it results in the incoordination of movements. And all of these things you will learn in physiology also, correct? There is something called as intention tremors, where whenever a person is trying to make any movement, that causes tremor. Okay, it is a coarse tremor occurring at 4 to 6 per second. Then there is disturbance in gait, disturbance in posture, speech, and so many other manifestations can be seen. And there are certain clinical tests to assess the cerebellar function. Finger nose test, you ask the patient to touch doctor's finger and then touch his own nose. Then you do this. What is this test? You will tell me what this test is in the next class. Okay. Then let us go to the basal ganglia. Okay. Now, basal ganglia is a large mass of gray matter that is situated in the cerebral hemisphere. So, this entire structure is what is the basal ganglia. Now, I'm not going into the details of physiological aspects of this because this is a physiology topic where they teach you direct and indirect pathways and everything. I'm not going into details of that. I'm only telling the anatomical aspects, relevant anatomical aspects. Okay. Now, anatomical divisions, I have the caudate nucleus, lentiform nucleus, amygdaloid complex, and the claustrum. Okay. What are the anatomical divisions? Caudate, lentiform, amygdaloid nuclear complex, as well as the claustrum. So this amygdaloid nucleus is a continuation of the caudate nucleus only. If you look at it, this amygdaloid nucleus is a continuation of the caudate nucleus, and this big structure that you see is the globus pallidus, and the lateral one is the putamen. Okay, then this is the thalamus. If this is a thalamus, and in the middle you have the internal capsule, somewhere here is the internal capsule, then you have the globus pallidus, and then you have the putamen, which I will discuss in detail when we do the cadaveric image sections. Correct? Now look at this, guys. So this is where the basal ganglia structures are located. So this is the thalamus, amygdala, and this is the caudate nucleus, which continues as the amygdala. And then I have the globus pallidus. And then putamen and globus pallidus are more lateral. Then you have the external capsule. So basically it goes like this: thalamus, internal capsule, globus pallidus, putamen, and external capsule and uncus. So this is an order in which it is asked in most of your entrance examination, as well as in your cadaveric sections, which we will discuss in subsequent classes. So the word corpus striatum, it is called a striatum because it has a lot of lines. Okay, it has mainly caudate nucleus and lentiform nucleus. Now, this lentiform nucleus has globus pallidus and putamen, correct? Now, this globus pallidus is more medial, putamen is more lateral. I mean, if you look at an MRI or a cadaveric section, this is how you identify. Then, caudate nucleus and putamen are together called as neostriatum, meaning these are newly developed structures, whereas globus pallidus is more, ancient. It is called as paleo structure. Can I continue with the class?
Yeah, ma'am, please wait, ma'am. Recording also stopped. Ma'am, you can use that one finalized PPT.
Okay.
Okay, ma'am, you take time, ma'am, and you can continue the class from here only. Just
No, I have to finish by 6 because some other
yeah, okay,
commitment
okay,
is
understand,
6
ma'am,
o'clock.
understand.
Yeah,
Okay,
I don't
okay,
want to extend it beyond 6, and I don't want to keep the topics also pending because as such, I still have few more topics
yeah,
left.
yeah,
So
okay,
this is the finalized PPT. Now I've just opened it.
okay,
I'll
ma'am.
share the screen. Just hold on for a second.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can continue from where you have stopped. Just to use
Yeah,
that
yeah.
PPT.
Sure, sure. Okay, is this screen visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so shall I start the class?
Yes, yes, please, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. So now look at the caudate nucleus and putamen. Together it is called as striatum, whereas the globus pallidus is called as paleostriatum. So corpus striatum is a big term. Okay. It contains caudate nucleus and lentiform nucleus. Lentiform nucleus further has putamen and globus pallidus. Caudate nucleus and putamen together is called as neostriatum. GP is called as paleo. Now, you have to remember this particular division, because it is slightly confusing because you have divisions here also, you have another division here also. But remember, corpus striatum is a very big term that has both caudate and lentiform. Lentiform has putamen and globus pallidus. Putamen and caudate together is neostriatum. These are newly developed structure. How do you remember? CPU, guys. CPU is a newly formed structure, right? CPU is the newly formed structure, and caudate and putamen is CP. They are the neostriatum. Globus pallidus is Purana. Globe is Earth is very Purana, na? So globus pallidus is Purana. And caudate and putamen is CPU. They are the newly formed structure. I hope this mnemonic helps. All right. Then neostriatum is formed by the CPU structures, caudate and putamen. Paleo is Purana. Purana is globe. Globe is globus pallidus. Archistriatum is formed by the amygdaloid nuclear complex and claustrum. Okay. Now, this is the anatomical division. Whereas if you look at the functional division of basal ganglia, this you will study in physiology. You have all of these: corpus striatum, subthalamic nucleus, substantia nigra, ventral striatum, ventral pallidum. All of this is the functional divisions. Let us say, for example, if there is any problem with the substantia nigra, we have something called as Parkinsonism. If there is any problem with subthalamic nucleus, we have some other disease manifestation. So, if you have any issues with any of these structures, whether it is STN, substantia nigra, striatum, or pallidum, they will have certain disease manifestations. Okay, these are the functional divisions of basal ganglia. Whenever there is any problem, whenever there is any issue with this, we'll have some disease
Ma'am,
manifestation.
sorry for interruption. Please start the recording, ma'am. You are the host now.
Okay, wait a second. How do I record this?
There will be a
Record on
record
cloud,
button.
right?
Yeah, please click on that one.
Yeah.
Okay, ma'am, left actually.
Can I continue?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So now let's talk about the caudate nucleus. Now, caudate nucleus is a C-shaped gray matter that is derived from the telencephalon. Now, what are the relations of the caudate nucleus? And this is how the questions are also asked. So, caudate continues as the amygdaloid body, right? Now, it is intimately related with the third lateral ventricle. So, in tomorrow's class, we'll study about the lateral ventricle and the dural venous sinus. Now, the head bulges into the anterior horn of the ventricle and it forms the floor. It's continue with the putamen. The body lies in the floor of the central part of the lateral ventricle and the tail is in the roof of the inferior horn of the ventricle. And this is the amygdaloid body. Okay. Yes. Lentiform nucleus. Now, lentiform nucleus appears triangular in coronal section, but its tip is directed medially. Okay. Now, it is divided by a thin lamina known as of white matter known as external medullary lamina into globus pallidus and the putamen. Correct. So the medial one is the globus pallidus, the lateral one is the putamen. And this is the yellow structure that we see in the section called as the claustrum. And here we have the external capsule. So if you in the order, you have to remember this. First, we have the internal capsule. Then we have the globus pallidus, putamen. Then we have the external capsule, claustrum and uncus. Okay. This is a very important cut section that you have to remember. Then putamen. Here you have the globus pallidus, then we have the putamen. Putamen is that structure which receives all the afferents, different afferents to the, the basal ganglia comes to the putamen. Okay. Putamen is derived from the telencephalon. It lies medial to the insula. Correct or not? This is the insular cortex, and now we have the medial to the insula is the putamen. It is bounded laterally by the fibers of the external capsule and medially by the globus pallidus. It's very easy. If you remember this order, you can write the medial and lateral relations. It is separated from the caudate nucleus by the anterior limb of the internal capsule. This big, sort of structure that you see in blue is the internal capsule, and this is the anterior limb, genu on the posterior limb. And the one that you see over here is the head of the caudate nucleus, and this is the thalamus. The putamen is separated from the head of the caudate nucleus via the anterior limb of the internal capsule. Then we have the GP. GP is the globus pallidus. Now, GP constitutes the inner component of the lentiform nucleus. Correct? Now, this GP is subdivided into globus pallidus externa and globus pallidus interna by the internal medullary lamina. Okay. Medially, it has the posterior limb of the internal capsule that separates it from the thalamus. Laterally, it is bounded by the putamen. Okay. Basically, if you remember this one cut section and the order that I have taught you, what is that order? Internal capsule, globus pallidus interna, externa, putamen, external capsule, claustrum, and the insular cortex. You can answer any relations when it comes to caudate, thalamus, as well as the putamen and globus pallidus. Then, substantia nigra. Where have you heard this substantia nigra, guys? We have heard this substantia nigra in the midbrain. So, this substantia nigra is a large motor nucleus that is present between the tegmentum and the crus cerebri. Correct? It is the big motor nucleus. If you remember, I have taught you this as well, which is present between the tegmentum and the crus cerebri. So this is the crus cerebri. Can you see? What is crus cerebri, guys? Crus cerebri has all the descending tracts from the cerebrum. That is why it is called as crus cerebri or cerebral peduncles. Correct. Then these are the dopaminergic group of neurons that we have here. This entire structure, which is having this, pars lateralis compacta and reticulata, is the substantia nigra, which contains the dopaminergic neurons. Whenever we don't have the dopaminergic neurons, we have a disease called as Parkinson's. Correct. Now, what is pars reticulata? Pars reticulata is the ventral cells pars portion. Functionally, it is related to the internal part of globus pallidus. They use inhibitory neurotransmitter, which is GABA. Once you do, guys, your direct and indirect pathway, have today listen to this class, go back and read up basal ganglia even in physiology, so you have a completion. Okay, then what is pars compacta? Pars compacta is the neurons here are pigmented because of the presence of the neuromelanin called, and these cells contain the dopamine. So pars compacta has dopamine, and all of these afferents go to the putamen. Correct. The pars reticulata, they use the inhibitory neurotransmitter GABA, whereas the pars compacta has dopamine. Next, subthalamic nucleus or STN. Now, if this is the substantia nigra, this is the subthalamic nucleus. Subthalamic nucleus is derived from the diencephalon, and it lies dorsomedial to the posterior limb of internal capsule and dorsal to the substantia nigra. Again, this is a very important diagram, guys, wherein you can see globus pallidus. This is the putamen, and here you will have the insula. Okay, here you have, internal capsule. This is the external capsule and the insular cortex, and this is the caudate nucleus. This is the thalamus. I'm taking a section like this, guys. Okay, this is the substantia nigra, and this is the subthalamic nucleus. Whenever there is a lesion in the subthalamic nucleus, I have hemibellismus. This violent movement that you are seeing, this is hemibellismus. Okay, again, this is a physiology topic where they'll teach you about whenever there's a lesion in any of these nuclei, it results in some manifestation. Okay. Then dorsal striatum has caudate nucleus and putamen. Ventral striatum has olfactory tubercle and nucleus accumbens. Dorsal pallidum has globus pallidus. Ventral pallidum is the part below the anterior perforated substance. Now, I have put one MRI image also here. You can, look at this image, guys. Okay, what are we seeing? These are the lateral horns of the anterior horn of the lateral ventricle. And next to that is what I have is the caudate nucleus. Here I have the thalamus. Here I have the internal capsule, globus pallidus, putamen. This is the hypothalamus, substantia nigra, and subthalamic nucleus. Look at this image. Now look at this. What is this? Anterior horn of the lateral ventricle. This is the caudate nucleus. This is the thalamus. This is the third ventricle. Then what else we have? This is the internal capsule. This is the medial one, would be globus pallidus. This is the putamen. Then the white matter that you are seeing is the external capsule. Then the yellowish thing, I mean, in the specimen it looks yellow, but here you can see this is the claustrum and this is the insular cortex. Same image you see on MRI as well. Look at it on this side. What is this? Anterior horn of the lateral ventricle. This image, this rounded sort of grayish structure you see is the caudate nucleus. This whitish structures that we come across is the internal capsule. Here you have the globus pallidus and the putamen. Then again, the white structures you're seeing over here is the external capsule. This is the insular cortex. This order is very important, guys. Very, very important order, because you see the similar thing on MRI also. If there is any lesion, if there is any, let's say a baby has hydrocephalus, and then what happens in hydrocephalus is there's a lot of CSF accumulation here, and all of this structures will be shifted. There's a midline shift, isn't it? Look at this. This black things that you see over here is filled with CSF. That is why here in the anterior horn of lateral ventricle also you have black thing, and even in the third ventricle also you're having black things. And you see, here also you're having black things only. And this whitish structure that you see is the bone. Okay, this is the thalamus and third ventricle. This is just a section that I have put over here to show you how the basal ganglia actually looks even on an MRI. This is a very important image, especially for your entrance examination, where they say, let's say a patient has for example a cortical stroke, then which of these structures will be affected? Obviously the internal capsule, isn't it? They'll just mark any of these lines and they say a patient has stroke, then which of the structure is gone? So it is the internal capsule. Now let's just take a question. Which basal ganglia nucleus plays a crucial role in regulating voluntary movement by inhibiting unwanted movement? So basically all of this also are, every nucleus takes part in inhibiting unwanted movement. That is a role of the basal ganglia, but subthalamic nucleus is more important. Then what is the blood supply? Lenticulostriate branches of middle and the anterior cerebral arteries and anterior choroidal branches of the internal carotid artery. So lenticulostriate and anterior choroidal arteries, okay, which are the branches of the ICA. All right, guys. So in today's class, we have finished the motor aspects, okay, everything about how a movement is initiated, how a movement is processed, and how it is finally executed by studying cerebellum and basal ganglia. Basal ganglia as such is a physiology topic, but you should know about these nuclei, which is very important. Anatomical considerations are also quite important. In the cerebellum, number one, you have to know different layers and what cells are present. Number two, you have to know about the deep cerebellar nuclei. And of course, in physiology, you obviously study about the mossy fibers and the climbing fibers and output and input and all the tracts and everything are more concentrated in physiology. But anatomy, you have to know about the phylogenetic classification of the cerebellum, which is very important, and also the layers of cerebellum. You have to know this much. All right. If you have any doubt at all, you can reach out to us across these social media handles, and I'll be more than happy to clarify them. And in tomorrow's and subsequent classes, it's going to get even more interesting, and we'll be talking about dural venous sinuses, ventricles, and thalamus, and so on. Okay, I hope you found this class useful, and I'm really sorry for all the technical snacks, and we make sure that we don't have any such snacks from next class onwards. And I really hope you have found my classes useful, and I wish you guys all the very best. Keep studying, keep reading, and you will sail through examinations. And thank you so much, guys. Have a great Sunday, great weekend, and I'll see you in the next class. Bye bye. Thank you.